Hi guys, Frank here, and I am joined by a selection of Robo Force action figures, both old and new. The old figures, of course, being from the 1984 Ideal Toys toy line, and the new figures being most recently released by the Nacelle Company, the same company that does the toys that made us, as well as other properties, other shows, and other upcoming action figures. But these are the very first action figures they have ever produced. And I wanted to kind of compare and contrast and show you a couple things I've done with these guys and kind of give you a general overview of what Nacelle has done with these guys, but also show you kind of the roots of Robo Force and where it originally came from. These two figures, like I said, vintage figures from 1984. Unfortunately, they are not my childhood figures. Those childhood figures were sadly lost to the ages many years ago. These two I picked up at a local vintage toy shop probably close to 20 years ago, and I want to say I paid maybe $11 or $12 a piece for them. At the time, both of them were sealed, but you know, that 30 plus year old or 30-year-old cellophane tape has since let go, so I figured I'd take Max out of his package since there was no longer anything sealing him in there. But 100 is actually still sealed. That ancient cellophane tape adhesive is still intact on his box, and I thought it might be fun as part of this video to finally let him out of his prison, because it's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time before that tape lets go and it tears off the box as well. So I thought maybe we'd do this as part of the video. And this is officially the oldest action figure, sealed action figure I have ever opened up. It feels so wrong, but it feels fun too. It feels fun. Let's see if I can do this without tearing the cardboard any more than maybe it already is. Ah, oh, success. I mean, you know, we can't properly review 100 without having him out of the package, right? Okay, we put the box off to the side. I've been staring at this guy for years on the shelf, thinking to myself, one of these days, I need to get him out of that box. Wow, his little plastic base feels okay. Feels okay. You know, flexible plastics and rubbers, especially oh, this thing's yellow, doesn't it? Especially decades old flexible plastics and rubber. I know they get a pretty bad rap for losing that flexibility and dry rotting and tearing and ripping and cracking and falling apart. But man, this feels pretty good. And this feels more like a vinyl as opposed to Max's, which feels like legitimate rubber, and it's still perfectly fine. These things were released in '84, so that makes them, they're going on 39 years old now, which is insane. And Max still sticks just fine. And this is paper surface, and he's even getting a little bit of grip on that. 100... he's getting a little bit on there. I'll bet if I put him on a piece of glass, he'd still work pretty well. Anyway, let's look at what else he comes with. All of these robots, all of these figures came with a little mini comic that also featured not only the other figures in the toy line as far as pictures of those figures go, and a full color mini comic, but at the backs of these mini comics, they also showed some key pieces from the rest of the toy line. The good guys and the bad guys. The good guys are called the Robo Force, and the bad guys are called the Evil Robot Empire, as you can see on the back of 100's box there. Good guys and the bad guys both had a vehicle, a battery-powered vehicle that they could ride in. It would carry one robot, and then you could potentially grapple onto another robot or something else. And like I said, they were battery powered. They came with a little flexible plastic robot you would use to pump up a balloon in the back of the vehicle, and the balloon would inflate and push on a switch that would activate the motor that would make the vehicle drive forward. And the balloon would slowly deflate, and once it deflated enough, it would release the switch, and the vehicle motor would come to a stop. My brother had that vehicle when we were kids, and together I think we had just about all of these figures, except for, I don't think we had this guy Cruel, and I don't think we had Sentinel. I think we had the rest of them, though, if memory serves. I'm going to have to dig up some old pictures because it has been a long time since I've seen those old figures. I was a kid still when they, I'll just say, disappeared. But getting back to the rest of the toy line, the Command Patroller, which I actually had. It was a large vehicle. You know, you can kind of see here, compared to the size of the robots, how large that vehicle was. Had a compartment on the side. You put a robot in. That whole thing would rotate around, kind of like a Lazy Susan type of a thing. You'd stick a robot in, then you'd turn it back around to kind of hide him. Had a claw on the front that could hold onto really just a platform that another robot could sit on, and had a cubby hole up here where the guy could drive it. And then in the rear of the vehicle, a little trap door that would open up, and you could stuff a robot or two back in the rear of the vehicle itself. But that was awesome. That was a great toy. I loved that thing, and God, I wish I still had it. Then they had a large play set called the Fortress of Steel, which I guess was supposed to be Max's headquarters, or the Robo Force headquarters. That we did not have, for better or worse. And then this, if I'm not mistaken, this is what started it all for Max Steel. This was like a big, at the time, I'm talking 1984, $500 for this programmable robot. I used to drool over that thing in the Sears Wish book and what have you, and obviously never got it, probably never will get it, although vintage ones are available these days. But I think that's what started it all. If I'm not mistaken, that came first, and then the Robo Force toy line, the action figure toy line, was developed based on the popularity, or maybe perceived popularity, of that large programmable robot. We got all of those toys, I want to say it was Christmas of 1985. Mom bought almost the whole toy line for us because she found them somewhere on clearance, because these guys were almost dead on arrival at retail. There was so much competition between Robo Force and Transformers or GoBots and everything else out there in the mid 80s at that time that they just couldn't compete, and they couldn't survive, and the line was canceled and cleared out in pretty short order at retail. So they didn't last very long, but not before Mom was able to buy a bunch of them for us. The rest of the stuff that comes with Hundred here, his instruction, I won't call it booklet, but his instruction pamphlet or instruction sheet, showing you how to use his suction cup, as if you really need a whole lot of instruction for that, showing that you can insert weapons on his fists, noting that those are not his fists on the instruction sheet, but and also how to activate the gripper arms, which the two gimmicks that every Robo Force figure shares, or maybe three gimmicks. One, you got the suction cup base of some type. Two, they are going to have some type of little weapons that you can insert onto their fists, and I believe most of them, if not all of them, also have ports on their backs here where you can also insert weapons. But the neatest gimmick, I thought, because the suction cups, I rarely ever used those really when I was a kid, because I didn't have any real smooth surfaces frequently that I would play on. But the most important one, the gripper arms. I mean, how cool is that? I didn't have any other toy in the 80s that had anything like that. And there's a little button in the back. You push up on that, and as you push up, let's do it like this. As you push up on that, I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. When I was a kid, I loved that. That made it totally worth it to me. But, important, do not stretch or twist robots' arms or permanent damage may result. So yeah, they were a little bit fragile. You had to be careful with these plastic straps that held them in place. And of course, you had to be careful with these flexible plastic bellows, so to speak, because yeah, those could be fragile if you were to stretch them or pull them out of shape. Anyway, let's get this paperwork out of the way, and we will get 100 armed up with his weapons. I'm going to try to do this without... I don't want to tear the plastic bag. Yeah, I know, it's just a plastic bag, but I don't want to destroy it. I still can't believe I opened this guy up. I mean, for like almost 2 decades, I've had these figures, and I've been staring at that guy on a somewhat frequent basis and thought about, man, I ought to just open him up. You know, he looks so sad there in his box, you know, Stinky Pete style. I need to get him out of that box, because what the hell is the point of keeping him in that box and not enjoying him? Gotta make sure I'm careful with them. I will say the plastic these are made of, you know, I was trying to be careful putting the weapons in there. I didn't want to stress the plastic, but the plastic on these guys actually seems to hold up fairly well, to be honest with you. I'm sure there are going to be versions that maybe weren't taken care of, or maybe weren't kept in conditions conducive to the longevity of plastic pieces like that. But these have held up pretty well, and while I have seen some yellowed versions, I haven't seen a whole ton of breakage as long as you're halfway careful with them. The weapons are made of, it feels like they're made of maybe a polyethylene type of a plastic. They don't feel like your standard ABS. I guess they could be, but you know, they're a more slippery type of a plastic. So let's get Max weaponed up. He actually has 3 weapons instead of just 2. Let's put him in the back there. And then let's put this weapon on this fist. And let's put this weapon on this fist. I wish his fist would rotate, because then, you know, I could do like the crusher arm thing. I guess that's funny too. And then each robot also had, or most of them, if not all of them, also had one additional gimmick that was unique to that particular robot. 100, as you saw me do just a little bit ago, if you flip up his helmet, he has these red eyes that actually come out a little bit. There's a geared mechanism in there. Let me get him better in the light. You can see those eyes actually protrude as his helmet raises, which I thought was hilarious when I was a kid. And it's still hilarious now, to be honest with you. And then Max here has a chest piece, and I want to be careful with the hinge here, has a chest piece that opens up, and you can store, I believe, maybe one of these plastic weapons in there. Maybe he can actually hold both of them in there. Maybe not. I want to be careful. I don't want to force it. Yep, that weapon stays in there. I'm not going to try to put 2 in there, because I think that might actually be forcing it. So the opening chest gimmick was Max's special little unique gimmick, and then the helmet and the protruding eye gimmick was 100's. So I mean, these are silly toys. They're fun toys. They're totally 80s toys, and they have a lot of charm, and they have a really special place in my heart and in my memories. And I'm also well aware that they completely passed some people by, and some people have essentially no familiarity with them. Never had any, because they just weren't at retail very long. They didn't have a long-running popular, you know, cartoon show or movies or anything like that made about them. There is a brief cartoon. There are some other comics and stuff, but they showed up and disappeared so quickly that I know a lot of people my age who were around back then and into toys and action figures just totally missed out on them, because they just simply weren't around very long at retail. Prices on these guys have crept up, just like everything action figure related from the 1980s here, the past couple or few years, but they're still pretty reasonable. I mean, you can get decent, loose, used copies of these for not a whole lot of money, if you're ever interested. But that's really only been a phenomenon for Robo Force here the past couple or few years that they've started creeping up some. Like I said, 20 years ago, I got these for like $11 each. Sealed, still sealed in their boxes. And even up till, a few years ago, you could have gotten sealed ones for probably $20 or $30 or something like that. So, but depending upon how much you want them, how much you like them, and what they're worth to you, I would say take a look around if you're ever interested in getting a few of the vintage versions, because they are fun. They are fun. They are silly. They are goofy, but they're decent little toys. For all of their for all of their shortcomings. They have a lot of charm. They certainly do. Now, on to the updated versions produced by the Nacelle Company. These were released late last year. I think they were on pre-order for probably I know the better part of last year. I want to say maybe last April or May of 2022, I think is when I put in my pre-order for these two guys directly from Nacelle. I knew that if updated versions of these guys were ever produced, that I was going to want to get them, at least get a couple or few of them. And I'm glad they started off with Max. Well, he's called Max 89 because Mattel sucks, but I'm still going to call him Max Steel. And I mean, totally, look at him. They got the same chest sticker. That's Max Steel. So Max 89, whatever. So the new Max Steel, I knew if they ever made a new one of those, I would get it. And he's very obviously Max Steel. A lot of the colors for sure, but a lot of the key design elements between this original vintage figure and the new one are very much the same. They've gone from one suction cup to two because he now has two actual legs instead of just the butt, which I know some people wish they were more like this versus that, but it is what it is. I, for one, if I want a Robo Force figure with just a single suction cup butt, I've got the vintage figure. But having one with two actual articulated legs now, that's a little more modernized as far as that goes. I appreciate that, and I actually like it. The only downside to it, and if you've ever seen reviews of these new Robo Force figures, you're probably aware that posing them can be a bit of a challenge. Now you can see that this guy is standing upright on his suction cups, but there is some wobble. And if you don't have his joints set just right, or if you don't have him on a perfectly smooth, flat surface where the suction cups can actually be used, then you're going to have a challenge posing him, and maybe even a challenge getting him to stand up reliably, because it wouldn't take a whole lot to get him to fall over. Even though with the legs straight and kind of positioned the way they are, he does stand up decently. But if you want someone with capable of doing some more dynamic type of poses, and I'll show this new version of Wrecker, which I had the vintage Wrecker when I was a kid. But looking at Wrecker here, if you take a closer look, you'll notice that he has different feet. Now, I came up with some 3D printed replacement feet for these guys. There's a link in the description below to Thingiverse where you can download the STL files to print your own if you're interested. The suction cups are great, and they certainly have their applications, but if you're looking for an option, just an alternative way to improve maybe the dynamic posability of these guys, then maybe these would help you out. They include, I mean, look, he's doing a one-legged stand there. And they're also, they also pivot. Each one is a 2 or 3 piece unit that includes, let me show you here, includes the actual foot base, which is, this is 3 pieces. There's the foot base, and then there's the vertical ball peg here, which is actually formed from 2 pieces of plastic. And that's because of the way that it's printed. This is printed in 2 pieces, and then you glue it together later, and then you take that peg and glue it down into the base. And it's done that way to maximize the strength of that peg. If you tried to print this entire thing just vertically on a 3D printer, you can do it. And I guess if you printed it 100% solid, maybe it would be strong enough to not snap. But unless you did it that way, you'd likely have a fairly weak point if this piece right here were printed vertically, just because of the way the 3D printing process works. So anyway, link in the description below. You can download the STL files for the foot and the peg, but also this piece. This is actually pretty critical. This is printed out of TPE, a flexible filament, and this is just a ball socket. Using Max here, and this is actually pretty simple to do. You grab his suction cup and pop. It makes a pretty loud pop when you pull that thing out of there. You pull the suction cup out of the foot, and this is tough rubber. It's not going to tear. It's not going to rip. Take your time, obviously, but they pull out fairly easily. And you take this rubber socket piece. Notice there's two ends. There's a little hole in the bottom. Little hole goes in first. And it takes a little bit to get it shoved in there, get it positioned right, and then push. You might have to use two thumbs. What I've found is if you use, and you can use a spudger, here's the end of a file, just to get it kind of started. It's actually not that hard. It's because I got the camera in front of me and I'm trying not to knock it over. You could also use some soapy water on this socket piece, if you wanted to make it a little bit easier to get pushed in there. Kind of lubricate it a little bit. I don't think I would use like oil, silicone oil or anything like that, but certainly some soapy water would do it. So there's the socket pushed in, and then you just take the foot, put it over the opening of the socket, and give it a push, and now he has a foot. Let's see if I get him balanced there. There we go. And that rubber socket that you insert in there, that gives it enough friction for it to hold its position. That's really a key part of the equation there. Without that rubber socket, the foot's not going to have any kind of holding power. So that's pretty important that you have that like that. And produce that socket as well. You could maybe use like a two-part silicone putty or something like that, if you've seen that type of stuff you mix together by hand, and stuff that in a socket and then shove the 3D printed foot up into the putty and let it set. That might work, but I would highly recommend using the flexible filament to produce the socket, and then use PLA, ABS, PETG, whatever filament you want to produce the foot and the ball peg there. But you can see that he's a lot more stable with these 3D printed feet if you want an alternative to the suction cups. And again, suction cups are fine. You just get a little more dynamic posability with these 3D printed units like that. Again, link in the description below. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to sign up for anything. You just go to the page and you download the files and you print. So let's take a closer look at the rest of Max, and we'll also get to Wrecker and take a closer look at him as well. Overall, they are super solid figures. I was really impressed when I opened the shipping box and I got these guys out. I was amazed at the heft that these guys had, and just how large the boxes are and how heavy the figures are. And they're very sturdy. I know they have some very veteran toy designers working on the design of these figures for Nacelle, and I think that shows in how the joints are produced, in how sturdy everything is. I really don't have any concerns about any part of this robot breaking. Those joints are a little creaky. They're a little creaky, but I think what they've done is I think it's kind of a joint design, a socket design that is similar to what I did with the foot. There seems to be maybe a softer plastic lining inside of the socket that the ball pops into, and that has a little extra grip to it. I mean, these are creaky, they're tight, but they don't feel like they're too tight. Nothing feels like it's going to break on this figure. Everything seems to work pretty darn well, so no concerns there. He does move fairly well with these, it's kind of a dumbbell type of shoulder joint. You'd think it would be really limiting, but it's really kind of not. You can get his shoulders in some pretty interesting shrugging kind of positions. Maybe he's a little bit maybe he's a little bit down. You can move the shoulders downward like that. And if you noticed, his hand just popped out. These are probably my only complaint. Maybe real complaint is the hand sockets. I wish they were ball sockets themselves, but they're not. They are this peg type of a design that just sort of wedges up inside of there. If they were like ball sockets, then maybe you'd actually get a little wrist articulation, and they probably wouldn't come out quite as easy, but not that big a deal. Bicep rotation, ball joint again at the hip there. There's no bicep, or there's no thigh rotation exactly. There's just a little bit of rotation that ball joint gives you, which it gives you some. That's not too bad, but a full thigh rotation joint would have been nice. Maybe incorporated in here, like an upper knee rotation joint or something along those lines. You do actually have double jointed knees, but you don't get a whole lot of range of motion just due to how bulky the sculpt is. You do get a waist rotation, double jointed elbows, again, just kind of because of how bulky the sculpt is. Well, you still get a little, actually you get a little over 90 degrees, so I guess that's not too bad. And you do get that bicep rotation and a little head rotation, and there's a little bit, his head does look up and down and kind of side to side just a tiny bit. I believe that's actually on the small ball joint up there. Max also comes with some accessories. He's got, what, 4 different accessories here. You have a pistol, which is, or a cannon. I don't know what you call it, a pistol or a cannon. He can actually, he can hold in his hand. Hand doesn't open up, but it's not that big a deal to get that hand cannon, let's call it that, his hand cannon inserted in there. And then he has these 3 attachments. Now, they all plug into these little sort of trapezoidal shaped ports. There's 3 of them on his body, but each one seems to plug into, reliably plug into only 1 port. So let's make sure I get the right thing plugged into the correct port. Let's see, does that plug into there? No. This one plugs into, yeah, I believe this one plugs into there. And then we've got another one on his back there. And maybe that is, nope, that's not it. It's the smaller one. So this little sensor deal, whatever that is, maybe that's a laser guy. Who knows what that is? You know, in the 1980s, you know, we had toys and we didn't really scrutinize too much exactly what was what and if stuff even really made a whole lot of sense. Does that? Nope, that wouldn't go there. And that's kind of what we have here. They're just silly, fun toys. I will say well-made, well-constructed toys, but, you know, there's that 80s silly factor they definitely have going on here. No doubt whatsoever about that. These weapons are a little tight as far as getting them plugged in there. Okay. Those are plugged in. That one in the back's not really doing a whole lot. Would be nice maybe if the little cords, the umbilicals, were flexible to where you could kind of move them around, or if maybe there were a few more ports elsewhere on Max where you could plug them in different places. Might have been kind of might have been handy, but it is what it is. And I think he actually looks like a lot of fun. I really do, especially next to old Max. You know, I mean, it is obvious that he is Max Steel. So I think they did a good job of homaging the overall look and feel of Robo Force, while also providing us with a figure that looks like it belongs in the 21st century. You know, so overall I am really happy with these figures. Now let's take a look at Wrecker. Now I do not have the vintage Wrecker here with me. I did have him as a kid, but again, sadly, he's no longer with us. So let's look at Nacelle's updated version of Wrecker. You know, I tell you what, let's take a quick look here. I don't have the vintage Wrecker with me, but we can take a quick look in the comic here. If you want to kind of compare, here's Wrecker here, the vintage one. You know, the colors are the same, kind of the general look and feel and aesthetic in a lot of ways are the same. Some of the same design cues in the shoulders, similar design cues certainly in the head. You know, the red stripe, the bulbous black dome-shaped head, sort of like the little mask type of thing over his mouth. Not the eyeballs so much, because this guy has those crazy-ass fluorescent red eyes, and this guy doesn't, but a lot of design cues they took from the original Wrecker. And I would say when I was a kid, Max was my favorite, of course, but I think Wrecker was probably my second favorite. And I think it's because he really kind of had that sort of an attitude of going in and breaking and destroying, you know, for good purposes and reasons. So let's take a look here at Wrecker. He's very similar to Max in a lot of ways. He does have a little more head movement, a little more head articulation than Max, and he has this mouthpiece that sort of flops up and down, which Max obviously does not have and wouldn't be appropriate for Max anyway, but he has that. He has those crazy eyebrows, crazier even than Max's are, which give him a lot more character. He has, take a quick look at these. He has these huge crane pieces. These are massive, chunky pieces of plastic holding various types of implements. You know, Wrecker, okay, he's got like a hook, a Wrecker hook. I don't know exactly what this is supposed to be. This is one of those things where you're supposed to use your imagination to decide for yourself what it's supposed to be. Unless Nacelle, I guess, comes out and tells us something additional or provides us with some additional detail, which, spoiler alert, they're supposed to be coming out with a new show for these guys, which will be interesting. Maybe they'll go into a little more detail as to what that is. Some type of weapon, maybe it's used for construction or demolition. His name's Wrecker, so I'm guessing it's supposed to break shit. I guess we'll find out. The rest of his articulation, for the most part, is very similar to Max's. He has the same type of dumbbell system in the shoulders, which, you know, plenty of rotation, plenty of articulation, a lot of character in there. He has bicep rotation. He has double jointed elbow that gives you, on Wrecker here, I think we're only going to get right about 90 because of his massive, super bulky sculpt. And the forearm here is different. He has sort of a pile driver type of an attachment there. Pile driver might not be. Maybe it's a demolition hammer. Let's call it a demolition hammer. Is what Wrecker is dealing with there on his left hand. And on his right arm, same shoulder, same type of elbow joint. But here, and I really loved this, I liked this, something I wish Max had is articulated hands. He actually has these articulated claw hands. They not only rotate this way, which is actually really neat, I think, but they also open and close. Because, and it's handy, no pun intended, because he comes with this little flower bouquet accessory for some unknown reason. I still don't know why exactly he comes with flowers. I'm hoping that becomes apparent when they release some more information about the story, but he comes with a flower accessory, and fortunately he has grippy hands he can use to grip onto his flowers. So hopefully we'll get a little more detail on that here at some point. Moving farther down the body, there's no waist rotation on Wrecker, which I kind of wish he did have that. Not a deal breaker. It's not a big deal, but it would be nice to have. Same type of hip joints, just balls. No thigh rotation other than what's provided by the ball joints themselves. Double jointed knees. Again, because of the bulk of the sculpt, he can get about 90, which that's respectable considering how bulky he is. And 90 is plenty for what these guys are going to do as far as posing goes. And then I have already taken the liberty of swapping out both of Wrecker's suction cup feet for these posable printed plastic feet, just to kind of give him that added posability, which let's see if we can do something a little bit crazy with them. The joints are really nice on these guys. They're stiff without being too stiff. I wonder if he can do, oh man, if he had waist rotation, we could do like the superhero pile drive type move with him. Unfortunately, I don't think he's going to be able to pull that off. Let's see. Oh yeah, maybe we can pull this off. Oh shit, yeah, look at that. Look at that. Imagine this guy on the shelf like that, huh? Boom. That's, you know what? I think that's actually how I'm going to pose this guy. Yeah, I think that's how this guy is going to go on my shelf. Just like that. Superhero pile driver move with a bouquet of flowers in his hands. That's it. That's the money shot. All right. Well, hey, guys, I won't make this video any longer than I already have. Again, if you're interested, if you have access to a 3D printer and you're interested in swapping out these feet for your Robo Force figures, just click the link in the description below, download the stuff, and happy printing. I hope you enjoy them. Please let me know if you have any issues with them if you do decide to print those out. And hey, thanks for watching, and I hope anyone who's not familiar with Robo Force, maybe this prompts you to take a closer look into the history, if not to actually pick up just one or two of these for yourself, you know, vintage ones or the Nacelle figures or what have you. And I have no affiliation with anybody for any of this stuff. I do just simply enjoy these figures for what they are. So yeah, by all means, look into the history of it if you are at all interested, and thanks for watching. See ya.